When you hear the rhythm, start to move.
Hi everyone, my name is Varya and this is Shameless Careers, a podcast about career change. Please subscribe to this podcast on YouTube and podcast platforms. It really helps me grow the channel and share career change stories with people who may need it and who may feel stuck in their careers. Today, I'm super excited to interview Nikita. For 14 years, Nikita has been building a career of a software engineer at large tech companies, for example, ENTERPRENEUR, a tech giant in Russia, and Microsoft, where he reached the position of a senior software engineer. However, after that, Nikita decided to plunge into entrepreneurship, and he did this by joining Antler program. Essentially, you can join this program if you want to become an entrepreneur, find co-founders, validate your idea, and even raise initial funding. So, Nikita, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to ask you what it was like to leave Microsoft, what it was like to join Antler program, whether you found it useful, and of course, what it was like to be building your own business. What did you learn, and what was the outcome?
Thank you for having me.
So, let's start with the time when you decided to leave Microsoft. Can you tell me at which point in your career, so you are now a senior software engineer, enjoying your job, so at which point did you realize that you want to change something and actually try yourself in entrepreneurship?
So, first of all, I want to say that working in a big company, it's like feeling very safe. You have enough money, you have interesting project, you're surrounded with amazing people. But on the other hand, you are quite limited in terms of what you can do, your influence in terms of business, and even some tech decisions. You have some flexibility, but not a lot. So at some point, regardless of what I said, you actually stop growing. So you start thinking that, okay, I haven't learned a lot over the last few months or over the last 6 months. And then you start thinking, what else can I do? You have more free time. You basically start thinking about other opportunities. And then naturally, you actually start thinking, okay, can I build something from scratch? Can I do something on my own? And that's how the idea came.
Right. And did you consider building a project on the side, or did you know that you want to go and join an entrepreneurship program?
So another drawback, and that's probably my personal drawback working in a big company, is that you are quite disconnected from business. So you can build something, but you don't really know how to sell it. You don't really know who to sell it to. Again, that's probably, you still have this opportunity, but I didn't do that. So I didn't really know, I could build something, but I didn't really know how to sell, who to sell, what the problems I wanted to solve.
By the nature of your role, where you were in the engineering capacity, yeah?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I actually started with looking for other people who can come up with idea, who know the problem, so that we can come together and try to solve.
And when you decided to leave Microsoft, did you have any doubts? Because, of course, it's a big company, it's a great brand. You have been progressing within your career within this company. Yeah, was it easy to... Did you have any second thoughts whether you should leave this place or not?
I think at that point, I already realized that I want to change something. So leaving Microsoft was like, not maybe the Microsoft itself, but a team in the product was quite an easy choice. Even though I liked the people, I liked everything, but I stopped growing. So the decision was made. In terms of the fears, of course, when you start working, like when you're at the age of 21 in a big company like Yandex, and then you keep working until you are, like, I don't know, for 15 years, of course you have some fears that something might not work out, something might go wrong. But I think I had a lot of plan B, plan C, plan D. So I felt quite safe.
And can you tell me how you thought about your plan B? And why did you feel kind of confident that you have this plan? Did you feel secure that you can, for example, always go back to big tech?
Mm-hmm. So once I realized that I want to leave and I want to try something on my own, I started to think, okay, what if I fail? what I'm gonna do. So I started talking to different recruiters just to realize how easy it would be for me to find another job and where, and how much money I can make if I try to find something. So I realized that it was quite feasible at that time. So I felt quite safe, and I also had some savings. So I knew that I had approximately 2 years to try something out without actually having any income. So in these terms, I was covered.
Yeah, which probably is kind of one tip for people who may be thinking about something like this is to speak with recruiters, right? Just to assess what's your market position. Because of course, like I can imagine being a software engineer, like your profession is in quite high demand, but it may be different for other professions, right? So it's important to kind of test the ground before doing this. And can you tell me how did others react? For example, what were your colleagues saying? Did they say like, "Oh wow, it's a crazy risky move," or were they happy for you, or did you not talk much about it?
No, actually, they were quite supportive. I mean, my manager tried to keep me, but obviously they were happy about that. They were happy that I have a dream and I try to reach it.
Yeah, and did you find that your move was it typical or not really? Like, did you see other people jumping into entrepreneurship from software engineering at large tech firms?
Not much. To be honest, I don't know any single person from the big tech who actually did that. So in most cases, as I said, you feel safe. So even if you want to progress or change something, you either change a team or you change a company. But you still go like from Microsoft to Facebook, from Facebook to Google, from Google to Amazon, etc., etc. And you don't have any intention or will to actually change something in terms of like go into startup or entrepreneurship.
Okay, so and then you decided to join Antler. Can you tell me a bit more, I guess, about the program and how did you choose it? Did you consider other entrepreneurial programs or not? Yeah, and can you tell a bit more about what it is?
So once the idea came to start my own business, I started exploring other opportunities, and someone told me about Antler, I think. And there are quite a few programs in entrepreneurial programs in London. Antler is one of them. Entrepreneur First is another one, and there are a few others. So I started exploring these opportunities, and I applied to Antler. They came back. I had a few interviews, and then I got an offer.
And how did you choose Antler? Why did you like it most?
Basically, apart from Antler and EF, all others are dedicated to specific domains, and I didn't want to restrict myself to any domain. And EF, they didn't accept me, so I didn't really have a choice.
Right, okay. And so can you tell me a bit more about what I guess this program looks like in practice so that people know what to expect? And also, like, what's the application process? Who can apply to these programs?
So essentially, the program is a 10 weeks program. They bring together 50 to 70 people with different backgrounds and different specializations, like tech people, business people. Then they give them some support. They teach them how to validate ideas, how to find co-founder, how to pitch, how to talk to customers, etc., etc. And then you have to speak with as many people as possible, figure out who would be your best co-founder, and start working on something. Then they give you a coach, which helps you during the program. And then you start working and exploring different ideas, talking to customers. And then starting from the week 5, you start pitching and you get feedback on your pitch. And at the end of the program, if they like what you came up with, they invest.
And can you tell me what did this journey look like for you? So which types of idea did you explore? How did you even start like looking for ideas? How did you go about finding co-founders?
As I said before, the only ideas I had by that time were technical ideas. So I was basically looking for a person who had idea in any domain that would be interesting to me. And that's how I met my first co-founder. And the idea was around web advertising. So we started exploring what we could do, how we could solve the problems. First, you need to find the problem. And the problem was real. Then you need to talk to customers and come up with ideas.
Mm-hmm. And did this person have experience in advertising? I would imagine, right? So it wasn't like just an idea that it emerged, I guess, from the past work experience from that person, right?
Yes, the person did have some experience. The problem was different, though. We didn't have any connections in the industry.
Right. And maybe looking back in terms of, I guess, lessons learned about the type of ideas that can have legs. Like, if someone is joining the program like you did and is trying to look for reasonable ideas, what should they look out for?
So, first of all, there are three aspects of that. First is the people, which is first and foremost. You first should find a co-founder that you can work together, that is reliable, your work style matches, you trust each other. That's the most important thing. And also stress resilience. So once you find that person, which is the most important, then you start looking into different problem areas. Because basically the third one is your solution. And the first one, people, is the most important because your solution will change 100%. Your problem area might change, but if you change people, then there is no company. So first of all, you need to find the person. Then, based on your and your partner's experience, you start exploring different problem areas, different ideas, and then you come up with solution.
Interesting. I thought my intuition would be to find a person who is an expert in the previous field because, yeah, I guess it's probably more difficult to kind of ideate around the areas that you may not be familiar with. But it's interesting that what you bring up is not, you don't select people based on their experience, but almost based on their like human qualities and, like you said, resilience, compatibility. Can you tell me, like, why is this human aspect so important or even potentially more important than the actual kind of looking for a person with the exact expertise that we need?
Imagine you have a person who is an expert in one particular domain, and then you start working on things. And very quickly, for sure, things will become very complicated. And then the person might be not resilient to stress. And then everything goes to hell.
Right. So it's because you expect the environment to be uncertain and ideas and solutions changing, like almost resilience is the most important factor, and everything else comes on top of this, right?
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, so and how did you? Oh, okay. Sorry, one more question actually on the while we're on the idea topic. Obviously, a lot of people who look for a career change look for something that gives them passion, purpose, like meaning. To what extent is this even a topic in entrepreneurial programs like Antler, like Entrepreneur First? Like, did you find most of the founders, were they driven by some passion and bigger mission, or were they more driven by a bit more like pragmatic considerations, like, okay, I want to build a business, doesn't matter in which area do I build it, kind of passion is almost something secondary to this?
I would say both types. There are different people, and I think most of them do have passion to do something, but the level of passion is different. The level of how much they want to actually contribute to the business is also different. So it's like all other humans. It's very hard to predict and say they're just different.
Yeah, so some people do say that for some people, exactly as you say, like passion and purpose is important, but some people say, look, I'm passionate about building a thing or like building or generating financial returns that I wouldn't be able to generate while staying employed, or at least like the aspiration to do it. So yeah, it looks like it. But how about you? Like, what category do you assign yourself to? What kind of drives you to be an entrepreneur?
Coming back a little bit, so when you choose your co-founder, you have a list of questionnaire. So you start asking each other questions about your motivation, about your type of working, and that's how you try to assess your like how well you match. And that's precisely one of the questions, like what's your motivations, what's your like three most important stimulus, let's say. For me, it was obviously will to to make money. Like if someone tells you I don't care about money, I wouldn't work with this person, mostly because this person would lie.
So integrity is questioned.
Exactly. So that might not be the first one, but that's definitely in top three. Another one is ambitions. I want to build something just to basically prove that I can do that. And the third one is interest. I'm really curious to build something new that hasn't been done before. So those three, it might be in different orders, but yeah.
And how about others? What type of responses to this question have you heard within the program?
Yeah, money. Yeah, as I said, if someone doesn't mention that, that's already a big question. A lot of people really wanted to build something in specific domains to help people. For example, in social care, like people really wanted to help other people, and that was their main driver. I think that was two major answers.
And you can you say which approach is more effective, or kind of again it's individual and there is no right or wrong. It's just about self-awareness.
No, there is nothing right or wrong here at all. Like different people might have different motivations, and that's fine as long as the motivation is strong enough, and they are happy to persevere. Then it's absolutely fine.
Okay, perfect. So let's go back to when you were ideating and kind of coming up with the business idea around advertising. What happened? How did you go about it? What were the hurdles, I guess? Yeah, can you tell me a bit more about how it looked like in practice?
So once you figure out your co-founder, you build a team, you have a coach, you start exploring problem areas and basically problems, which we did. And you must figure out, like make sure that the problem is real. So you start talking to different businesses, you start talking to different people that they really have this problem. And the way you do this, you must not ask them, do you really have this problem? Because the answer will be yes, of course. What you should do is rather ask them, what's your everyday work look like? What problems do you have? How you solve them? Have you tried to solve them? How you try to solve them? And then based on these answers, you can figure out if your intuition was right and the problem you are trying to solve is real. So once you have that, you start thinking about solutions. And then you can come back to these people and actually offer them this solution.
And why is it important? Can you tell me a bit more about why is it important not to ask about the problem? Because intuitively that would be kind of the most obvious thing to do. Like, oh, do you have this challenge? Okay, I need to build a solution for that. So why is it important to go into that level of detail and granularity and really understand kind of what is the person doing day to day?
There is a very good book called The Mom Test, and they explain it very good. So what they say, and I actually tried it out in real life. So imagine you ask your mom, you say, Mom, I'm doing this business. I'm trying to solve this problem. Do you think this problem is real? What would your mom tell you? Of course it's real. Go and solve it. I would pay a lot of money to actually buy your solution. And that's what most people would do if they are your friends, if they know you. So they would just politely tell you, yes, go and solve this problem. And of course, we will pay you a lot of money. But in reality, that might not be the case. The problem you are trying to solve might not be real. It might not even exist. And then you come back with, you spend a lot of time building your solution. And then you come back to these people and they say, oh, sorry, we don't have money. We actually don't know who to talk to about that. So...
Yeah, and some people say that it's important not just to frame it as like, do you have this problem? Would you like be interested in a solution? But actually the main task is, are people willing to pay for the solution, right? That you've built. And this is where like the reality hits, right? Either it's useful enough to be paid for or not.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you have gone through this validation process of your idea. How did the validation go? Did you validate the advertising problem that you were focusing on?
And that was my first mistake, I think, because now I know how to do that. Back then, I didn't. So we were talking to people who were around the industry, not in the industry itself, asking like very direct question. The mistake that I mentioned earlier, like, do you have this problem? And the answer was yes.
Yeah.
So we started actually building something, and then it took a few weeks to build, to talk about some not relevant people before we actually started thinking about, okay, how we actually going to sell it. And once we started thinking about it, we realized that we don't know anyone to sell this solution to. And then we started thinking, okay, how can we approach these people? How can we get connected? And it took like a few more weeks before we actually managed to speak to someone who told us, from the big company, who told us, until you have 10 million users, you are not interested. You are not interested to us. And then we started thinking, okay, 10 million users. Let's say your user acquisition cost is $10, which is not true. You need 100 million investments for that. And that was pretty much the end of the story.
Right. Okay. And so based on that, I guess how do we even look for people to say, like, you obviously, okay, I think then the assumption is that you need to almost start with asking yourself a question, in which industry do you have like a network and connections, right? Because based on your experience, even if the idea kind of like hypothetically may have legs, the moment you realize that you don't know anyone in the industry, like that will be your first hurdle. Like, how do you even go about it? Like, do you reach out to people on LinkedIn? It's probably, I guess, less efficient. So it's almost like a must-have to have some industry network, yeah, when you want to get the business off the ground.
There are two different types of ideas. First type is when you don't really need any connections. For example, Uber. You don't really need to know taxi drivers or their clients. You just go to them, you know how to find them, and then you build something and try to get them on board. Another type of idea is, for example, oil and gas. You need to work in this industry to understand their problems. You need to work to have connections to actually sell your solution. So based on what you want to do, you either need or not need this network.
Right. Okay, which is basically then like as you decide. Basically, the advice here is that when you decide which type of business you want to work on, you need to take this into account. And maybe at some point, if you realize that for your idea you really need a specific industry network, maybe then it's worth defaulting to other ideas which may be not requiring it. But then the next question is probably the ideas that don't require industry networks are probably also more easy for other people to implement. As in, like, you don't have a competitive advantage there, right?
Yes and no. Yes, because you are right. You don't have a competitive advantage, and everyone actually can do that. On the other hand, implementation is quite difficult, and not everyone can do this. Because even for Uber, you need to go. First of all, you need to decide how your solution will look like. Then you need to get some taxi drivers on board. Then you need to do marketing to actually bring their clients on board. And you have this chicken and egg problem always. Who would be your first? Like, you need to connect dots. So where you start with. So it's all about performing and implementation, which is very difficult. On the other hand, if talking about a second type of business, you already know what the problem is. You already know your client. So it's a bit easier to do that. But at the same time, you need to have a very strong network, and you need to be very precise and determined to actually convince people to work with you. Because imagine you try to sell something to enterprise. Would they work with a startup of two people who just started doing something? I'm not sure.
Yeah. And based on this your experience and what you've just said about these two options, do you have a preferred type of, like, based on, like, if you were going to Antler once again, what type of business would you focus on?
I tried both.
Okay. Oh, so there was another idea, right?
Well, I did Antler twice.
Okay.
So during my first time, I did this B2B2C type. The second time, I tried B2B. So I don't really have a preferred type. I think both are fine. It just it depends on the people who you work with. If they have expertise, if they have network, then you probably want to go with B2B. just leveraging their expertise. If your co-founder is not that type of person, then you can switch to B2C. It's fine.
And so what was the second idea that you worked on? And I guess what did you do differently from the first time around?
So I started with people who had expertise in some certain industry. The industry though was social care. So the guys I worked with, they had amazing network. They could reach to pretty much everyone in the UK in the social care. So we did like 70 customer interviews, I think, starting with the founders of social care homes, ending with the social care workers. The problem was that considering we wanted to build a unicorn, like $10 billion business, we couldn't really find something specific we wanted to work on, considering we wanted to make it a big thing. So we didn't manage to find anything. So the problem was mostly the industry.
Right. Or there was some ideas, but they were not just scalable enough for that,
yes.
right? Could you have said like, okay, the problem is not big enough, but we can still make like a lot of money or like some money, but not the unicorn? Or like, is building something that can technically IPO, is it like a mandatory criteria?
Depends what you want. And that was another question from this questionnaire that you have to ask each other during your like co-founder matching process. Like what actually you want. Are you fine with building business that would be profitable, but it won't be a unicorn? Or you really want a unicorn and you can't put up with anything apart from that?
Right. And what was the usual answer? I guess the same question as before.
Again, depends on the people. Some would be fine with the smaller companies. Some only wanted to build unicorn. So my co-founders, one of them was a second-time founder. So he already had built something and sold that company. So he really wanted to build a unicorn. That's why we actually were trying to find something really, really big.
Yeah. And which, it's probably an obvious question, but probably you see a qualitative difference when you see a person who has been a founder before, and especially if they manage to exit, versus someone who's doing it for the first time. I guess track record in this respect and really learning how to build a business is super valuable, which is why so many entrepreneurs like fail several times, but they try to build a business, get this experience, and then afterwards they make it. So it's kind of, I guess, less frequent that people are making it first time around, right?
Exactly. Even if you just try doing that, you gain a lot of experience. So next time you would probably avoid a lot of mistakes that you would make otherwise. So that was one of the criteria I had choosing a co-founder second time, that this person should have some experience as well.
And what type of businesses within Antler actually manage to... Actually, what is the criteria to raise the funding in the first place? So you should validate the idea, and Antler gives you money. If like, what criteria I guess should be met for this to happen?
I think criteria might be slightly different. Ideally, you should have some traction. You should have some evidence that someone would pay for that. Whether it's a letter of intent from different businesses, whether it's a working solution like some MVP and some people using it, or you have a website and you have this subscribe button and you have certain number of subscription.
And what type of businesses, based on what you've seen, have managed to get to this stage?
So out of my experience, there is one or two companies. Actually, in the beginning, there are around 8 companies who get funded by Antler at the end of the program. And then out of these 8 companies, 1 or 2 can raise next round after a year or 9 months, something like that.
Based on how they perform, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember the company that actually managed to raise. One of them was doing something for big venues. Like actually, they were calculating how efficiently the venues were using electricity and try to reduce that cost. And those guys actually managed to find a few clients. So they started making money quite soon. That's how they managed to raise the second time. Another companies depends, either B2C or small B2B businesses solutions for them.
What stars have aligned for them to actually make them eligible for something like that?
Actually, deep domain expertise,
Yeah.
because they knew their customers upfront. So basically, those people, they came to Antler knowing what they wanted to do and knowing who would be their potential clients. So they just managed to find the co-founder, started doing something, reached out to their potential clients that they had in mind before. And that's how they started.
Right. Okay. So overall, if you take stock of all your experience, like what would you say to people who are considering entrepreneurship programs such as Antler? Where do you think in which way are these programs most useful, and in which way are they kind of less useful, or maybe this is where your expectation hasn't necessarily been met?
I think overall the program is super useful, but you should consider a few things. First, you should have some runway, some money to feel more or less confident that you won't be under pressure after a few months, after because it takes some time to build and start getting revenue, and you might not have any income for a year, for example. So if you have this, if your runway is 6 months, you should be very careful with joining the program. The second one, I would say it's a good thing to at least keep in mind what areas you want to try your business in. Because if you come there and you're open to everything, it would be very hard to choose one and start working on it. So think carefully about where you want to work. Think carefully about your savings. Ideally, you should start working on something while you still have a job, and then at least to validate these ideas. And once you have some proof, then you can leave your company and go to Antler.
Interesting. It reminds me a little bit about the conversations that I've had with people about MBA. You know how some people go to an MBA to figure out what they want to do next. But actually what's recommended, and in fact I believe that's what a lot of MBA programs require you to do, is to write obviously a motivation letter, but showing kind of what exactly do you want to do and how this program can help you. So they almost assume that you know upfront what is your end goal, and the program is not there to help you figure it out, but more to get resources to get to this objective. And here it's like quite a similar story, right?
Exactly. You actually become more efficient once you know what you want to do, because it's still possible to figure this out on the way, but it would just take a lot of time. So imagine you spend a few weeks trying to figure out the area, talking to different people, trying to understand that, and then half of the program is already gone. And you just realize, oh, I actually want this and I need that type of person, and this type of person might already be working on something and might not be willing to accept you as a third person or something like that. So you just waste your time.
Yeah, but I would probably hypothesize that many people who go to these programs actually are in the camp of not knowing what they want to do. Do you think it's a fair statement? As in, like, many people probably see it as they come to this point where they want to change their career, join the program to help, understand what type of business they want to build. And the assumption is still that, that program will help them do that. Would you agree with this? Similarly to MBA, by the way, a lot of people knowing that motivation letters for MBAs ask you to spell out what you want to do, they still join it when they have no idea what they would like to do, right?
Well, I agree, but the most common case is when people know what they want to do and then they change their mind during the program.
Oh, okay.
So, and that happens in 90% of cases, because imagine you're a business person, you have worked in a certain industry, so you think that you know the problems, you know that at least you want to look into this area, and then you come and see another person who is very keen to do something else, but you really like this person, and you realize that, oh, I actually like that area as well. So you switch and start working on something else, and that's a very common case.
Right, interesting. Okay, cool. So let's move to the point when you have finished the program. So, and then kind of you decided to go back into employment, right?
Yes.
How did you, I guess, think about your strategy for your next career steps?
So at that stage, I started thinking about the industries I can work in, and I think I spoke with 30 to 40 different HRs, talking about their companies, talking about the problems they was solving, compensations, etc., etc. And the industry that I chose was a fintech industry. So I started looking into companies in this industry.
So you considered many
Yes.
industries across the board. Has a thought of going back to big tech like Microsoft ever crossed your mind? And what did you do with this thought?
No, I didn't really want. I knew that this option is always in my pocket, but I really wanted to try out something like something different, because the idea is, okay, I worked in these industries for a long time, and I know how it feels. Now I want to try something smaller where I would have more impact, including business decisions, impact on business decisions.
Interesting. You still kind of feel like you don't want to let go of entrepreneurship altogether. You still want to be part of an entrepreneurial story, even in employment capacity, but that's still interesting to you to be impacting business problems.
Exactly. There was actually another dimension. Apart from the industry, I wanted to realize like what type of the company, what size of the company I want to work in. So for me, I didn't want to go to a very big company like Series C, Series D startups, well, not even startups at that stage, but I didn't equally, I didn't want to go to very small companies like Series A, pre-seed startups. So for me, I figure out that it should be a medium-sized startup like Series B with 100 to 300 people, where I would get a high position. I would be able to influence some business decisions, but also tech decisions. And at the same time, I would be hands-on.
And how did you think about this maturity of the startup? Like, what was less attractive to you within earlier stage companies and within later stage companies like Series C, etc.?
It's always risk and the impact you can make. So if you consider small companies, there is always a risk that it won't work. So you can lose your job and you will be very stressed. At the same time, if it's a big company, you have like 1,000 people, you don't really make a lot of impact, because this is already an established company. They have their leadership, so you just do what you are set to do. While in this medium size, you still can have some impact.
And what type of other criteria did you have when choosing what you wanted to work on, especially given that you really were not married to any particular industry or product? So apart from this aspect of impact and level of risk, what else was important to you as you were choosing your next step?
Basically, what the company does. There was some certain areas I wouldn't go work for. Also, the team itself, the processes, how it's organized, the communication between people. So before actually joining my current company, I talked with a VP of engineering with my future colleagues, and I was quite satisfied with that.
Yeah, okay. So, and in terms of, you said what's another thing that's important to you is like teams and communication. Like, what was that was important to you in this aspect? And importantly, how did you check within the interview what was this communication like? Because it's really hard to distill it from the interview.
You still have time to ask some questions, and you can ask like, what project are you working on? What was the last issue you tried to figure out? What's your challenges within the team? What team are you working on? Tell me about your colleagues. How do you choose? How do you make tech decisions? So there are a lot of questions you can ask, and that's actually what I learned during Antler when I was choosing my co-founder. I learned how to properly assess people.
And what type of, I guess, for you, was it completely not important what type of product it is? Did you feel like some domains are kind of intrinsically more interesting to you versus others? Or for you, were you quite flexible in terms of, like, you didn't really have an emotional attachment to any particular domain?
I think there were some things like basically when you are an engineer, you mostly think about tech stack, about technologies, and in many cases, regardless of the industry, technologies are more or less the same. So when you work in the company, you mostly interact with that, and you make decisions on tech, and it doesn't really the industry doesn't really matter.
And how about people aspect? Was it important to you that people like that you like them? What was important to you about the team as you were choosing it? And how did you assess it?
You should feel confident, and you should feel that other people are supportive, that you really work as a team. Not only because it's easier and safer for you, and you can actually work at your best when you feel some support from other people. Uh, on the other hand, if you have like very hostage environment, you don't want to stay longer at work. You want to go home. You don't really want to progress. You don't really want company to progress. So that's why it was important.
And how did you assess it? Like, I guess this culture from of companies that you were selecting from.
First of all, out of the interviews, but also I found different people around the company who knew someone in the company. I started asking them, what does it feel like? What the aim of the company? Who is the founder? Is he the first time founder or not? Such kind of stuff.
Yeah, someone did mention it to me before, and that's the reason why I'm asking. How did you find out and distill what type of culture there is in the team? Because no one will tell you explicitly, okay, our culture is horrible. They will all say like, okay, it's great. And yeah, probably the best way to really understand what's happening on the ground is by speaking with people on the side without kind of outside of the official interview process.
You can also try to figure out how many people have left the company over the last, I don't know, some period of time, and how many people they hired, how old is the company, how many offices they have, what's their long-term plans.
And how did you find how many people left the company? That is something that you would ask in the interview, right?
You can try to find the company on LinkedIn, try to find their members of the company, and see if, for example, they have this tag hiring or open to work.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, super interesting to know. And how about, let's touch upon finance as well. In terms of financial aspect of different industries, did you find some discrepancies in terms of which industries pay more versus less?
Fintech pays the most.
Okay, cool. Clear. Okay, so based on all of these criteria, which company did you ultimately select, and where do you work right now?
Yeah, the company is called Stan Technologies, and they are doing invoice financing.
And how does the culture compare relative and type of work, I guess, compared to Microsoft? Because obviously you have seen like a big corporate type of career, and now you're in a much earlier stage company. What are the things that are different, and what is more exciting, and what is more challenging?
Oh, everything is different.
Okay.
So in big company, all the processes are already established. You have like the team has their own way of working. You have scrums. You know how to report. You know how to check and validate like your plans. In a startup, you actually need to set it up from scratch, or maybe not from scratch, but you need to establish those processes. And the teams are already also changing a lot, because one quarter they want to work on this project, but the next quarter they might switch, and of course they don't have enough funds to keep different teams, so they keep moving people around the team. So every project is like a new company. And that's actually the reason, one of the reasons why I chose them, because that's now up to me. I'm a principal engineer there, and I'm the only principal engineer there. So I also have a lot of impact on how to establish these processes, how to think of MVPs, and actually decide what we want to have.
And what's excites you about this process, and what do you find more challenging versus the role that you had at Microsoft?
Uncertainty. And that now, with all my entrepreneurial experience, that actually excites me the most, because I really can start building teams from scratch, start building new services from scratch without actually knowing if they work out or not, because without actually having like 100% confidence. So you got new people, you establish processes, you start working on something, then you set deadlines for yourself. That's very exciting.
And what's more challenging?
Pretty much the
The
same.
same thing. And would you say this type of setup is for a certain type of personality? Because I can imagine that for some people, this uncertainty would be not something that they would love. I guess, is there a typical profile of a person who would thrive in this type of environment and versus a person who would thrive more in an established corporate career?
I think it depends, because if you ask me, for example, 5 years ago, I wouldn't like that. Now I'm actually enjoying this process. So I think it's not the type of the person, it's also like a certain type of the person in certain period of time. Because people might change.
And-
One day you might not like it, next day you might, or like in a year you might like it.
And do you think you have changed because of your Antler experience?
100%.
Right. So what do you think has been this pivotal moment around how do you assess uncertainty as a concept? Like, why is it no longer stressful for you, but why do you find it exciting after Antler?
First of all, it's still stressful.
Okay.
But now I know how to cope with the stress. So first of all, you try to think a bit like wider. What are you doing? Why you are doing that? And then you try to split the work by like milestones, and you try to concentrate on things that you can influence. So you try to build step by step, but still keeping like the whole picture in mind. That's very important. So that every period of time you know where you're going and the way you are going, and you try to be on track for that.
And do you think within your current role, the fact that you have this mix of corporate experience and Antler experience, do you think it helps you right now?
A lot. I think the only reason why I got this job is because of my entrepreneurial experience, because it was very important for them that I'm not only an engineer, but also someone who can be like a bridge between business and engineers.
Which is so interesting because sometimes when we make these career detours, we think, okay, it's a risk. Like, that's why many people don't do it. But actually, for some jobs, it's exactly the mix of these experiences that makes you such a unique candidate and makes you stand out. And maybe it would open more doors for you versus if you just had one certain experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn a lot of soft skills as well, which many engineers lack. Engineers, they used to work with technologies. They don't, many of them, I'm not saying all of them, but many of them, they don't like interacting with people, they don't like interacting with businesses, but it's very important to understand that your business needs for many reasons. So once you start working on the other side, you start understand those people better. And then even if you come back, you're already somewhere in the middle, so you can like sit on two chairs at the same time.
And looking back and knowing everything that you know about Antler, about your journey there, would you, and if you bring yourself back into Microsoft shoes, would there be any scenario where you would say, okay, I wish I have stayed in Microsoft? And I think I know the answer to the question based on what we've talked about.
Never. Never.
And could you please elaborate?
Look, I think what's the most important for people is to grow. You set your goal, you want to grow, you want to learn new things, you want, I don't know, advance to the next stage, to the next level, get more money. And once you realize that, okay, you reach your floor, your ceiling, what else can you do? You start thinking about the changes. You probably first try to speak to your manager and maybe change the team or change the company or change the industry or start your own startup. So at some point you have no option unless you really will to stay and forget about growth.
And what advice would you give to your younger self looking back?
To be honest, no advice, because I have no regret of about what I did, and I thought about that, and I realized that there is nothing that I would do differently. Maybe I mean maybe I would move a bit faster, but that's the only one.
Yeah. And how about others? So imagine people who may feel stuck in their career and may want to plunge into entrepreneurship. What advice would you give to them?
First of all, to understand what they want. Maybe if they are fine with their like career now and they don't want to change and they are fine with not growing, okay, you stay. If you want to change something, you should decide what exactly you want. You should understand, like, do you want to start your own business? Do you want to work in another company? Do you want to change industry? Do you want to become more flexible in terms of like working from home or working while traveling? Once you decide that, you can start moving towards that. Let's say they want to start their own business. My first advice would be to think about what kind of business, what I don't know, all the details, and just try to find someone to start working with or start working on your own. And once you understand, once you validate your idea, once you have some proof that it might work, then you might leave. You can leave your company and start working. You can go to Antler, EF, or find someone on Y Combinator, co-founder matching platform. Doesn't really, or even with your colleagues. But once you have this proof, then you need to evaluate your finances, and then once you make sure that you are fine with that, just go and do it.
Right. So basically, as much as possible, starting something on the side of the current job as opposed to jumping into the unknown, like without an idea of what you are actually trying to get out of it.
The biggest setback I've seen so far with people who left their companies was that they didn't have enough money to keep working. So imagine you start working on something and of course you're uncertain. You can't be certain that your idea would work. And then you're running out of money. And people became super stressful. And then you can't actually reach your goal in terms of your business. And you start looking for a job and at the same time trying to move your business forward. It's super stressful situation.
Thank you so much, Nikita. Really, really good advice. Yeah. And I hope it helps people who are thinking about this path in their life. So many thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go.